We want to turn our attention to the sources of innovation. What leads to innovation, and what are the most common ways in which it can come about? So let's start with the sources of innovation. Well, this refers to situations that give rise to new innovation opportunities. So anything that leads to an innovation can obviously be described as the source of the innovation. But we can categorize these under various headings. We can group them under various headings and look at the various influences that have come into play, which ultimately lead to the development of new products or changes to existing products or new methods of production. In other words, they have led on to the sources of information, of innovation. Peter Drucker identified 7 sources of innovation. There are 4 innovation opportunities present within a company or industry. So of the 7 he identified, 4 of them are internal to the organization. These are unexpected occurrences, incongruities, we'll talk about what these mean later, process needs, industry and market changes. So these are internal to the organization. These relate to the organization from an internal perspective, and we'll go across what we mean by those in a few seconds. There are 3 innovation opportunities present outside of the company's control. These are demographic changes, changes in perception, and new knowledge. And we'll talk about these as well. So now we've got the agenda for this video. We've got the 7 sources that were proposed by Peter Drucker. So let's start with unexpected occurrences. To survive, companies must adapt to changing market conditions. Friedrich von Hayek, the Nobel laureate and famous economist from the Austrian tradition, once said that the future is unknowable. He meant it in a much more broad and philosophical context, but nonetheless, the future is unknowable. We confront so many possibilities as we move through life. New developments, new changes, new innovations, new inventions, new government policies, changes to all sorts of situations that perhaps hitherto were not even considered. And these unexpected events may lead to success or failure of innovations. So companies may have a good idea right now, but by the time they implement it, the world will have changed. It may have changed against them, or it may have changed in their favor, because we can't see the future. So companies are constantly trying to work out what is the likely outcome from investment decisions, from innovations, from changes they're going to make or are considering at the moment, and trying to guess what's going to happen in the future. Serendipity, if you like, luck, perhaps good luck, may account for some successful innovations. Maybe it's just simply companies are lucky. They come up with a design for a product, they put it in the market, and customers really like it. They were just lucky. They were just in the right place at the right time. And there's no other way to explain it. They were just fortunate. So serendipity may account for some successful innovations. Good management with good intuition may also account for successful innovation. Having a good management team who are capable of reading situations very clearly and understanding the implications of changes and of government policy and of trading relationships, and is able to assimilate all of this information, they perhaps can come up with better suggestions and may lead to better innovations as a consequence. Now, incongruities. Well, incongruities refer to the perceived expectation of a product and the differences between customer expectations. Sometimes companies come up with an idea and think this product is going to be very successful. This product we're planning is going to be very successful and we're going to launch it onto the market. But customers have a different idea. It could be that the information that led the company to develop that particular product was faulty. Perhaps the market research wasn't good. Perhaps the focus groups that the company used were not properly selected or not questioned appropriately. But all sorts of incongruities, things which do not match, may happen. It may happen on the positive side as well, of course. Sometimes companies design products or simply look at the existing product range and out of good luck, out of serendipity, as I said earlier, see a mismatch between what they're doing and what the current trend in the market is, and are able to make changes as a consequence. In other words, what they were doing was incongruous. It didn't fit what the market wanted precisely. So they've changed the product to try and get it to fit the market. Drucker explains incongruity as a difference between what is and what something should be, or people assume it to be. Sometimes companies may launch a product aimed at a particular sector of the market and find that the product is not working very well within that sector of the market. However, it is successful in a different aspect or part of the market, one which was not in their planning horizon at the start, one they were not targeting. They put it out in the market and found that other people were using it for a different purpose. And that sometimes happens. Drucker defined the following as some examples of different types of incongruities. Economic incongruities. This refers to the economic reality of demand versus the reality of the process. Sometimes what customers want is not exactly what the company is doing. Sometimes customers will buy the product and take the product, but ideally it's not matching their requirements 100%. It's near enough, but it's not an ideal solution. And if a competitor comes up with a solution that matches their requirements 100%, that competitor will steal the customers. So there is a danger. But companies sometimes can place products on the market in the hope that customers will buy them. Customers will, because perhaps there's very little alternative. But the product itself is not an ideal fit. It'll suffice. But if should a better one come on the market, the customers will change. Drucker identified the following as some types of incongruity. Well, reality and assumption incongruity. This refers to perception of what customers want rather than identifying the actual need of the customers. And that's the problem that companies may face. Companies may think this is what the customers want, but they haven't found out exactly what the customers want. They haven't identified it completely. So they put a product on the market that they hope that the customers will want. But it's not an ideal solution. And given it's not an ideal solution, the scope is there for innovation, for perhaps a different company to come along, look at the product, vary it, and match customers' expectations completely. And thereby, of course, steal the customers. Or it could be the company itself realizes the error of its ways and changes the product, innovates the product over time as they learn more about what the customers really wanted. The rise of MP3 players and companies focus on delivering MP3 players, which aim to further improve product memory, storage, and functionality. Well, if we take something like an MP3 player, which nowadays, of course, are more or less incorporated into smartphones, but the idea was that customers could play music and have this flattening experience. They didn't have to carry around large pieces of equipment. They could save music files in a very small format and carry many of them around with them. That was an innovation. That was a big innovation. But then further innovations could include more storage, the capacity to carry even more music around in a very convenient and small storage device, but also to increase the functionality of the device, perhaps include a radio or some sort of communications device, which ultimately, as I said, leads on to the development of a lot of the functionality of the smartphones that we have today. So, in the context of the MP3 player, Apple identified that customers are not interested in these improved features. Rather, they want a platform to be able to store, purchase, and organize their music. And that gave rise to iTunes and the iPod. So, Apple, an early adopter of this type of technology, identified this idea of perhaps storing information online and having iTunes and being able to access music from a wide genre, also a wide set of situations, being able to access it on the street if they've got Wi-Fi or if they've got a smartphone facility or an iPod, as it was back then. So innovation sometimes starts in one direction but may change over time, and it changes because customers have different requirements, and as companies discover those different requirements, sometimes quite small, moving from an MP3 player to an iPod with more functionality, more storage, the fact that the customers wanted that and companies responded, that led on to the innovations, which are ongoing. Today we have highly sophisticated smartphones, which can do a whole multitude of tasks. They have telephone, they can stream video, they can communicate in real time, they can video conference, they can do so many things. And now companies are looking to see, what do customers want next? They have improved the camera immensely. It's now a very powerful camera. What can they do next? What's the next one? And as we speak, perhaps you and I are challenged to think, what else can they do to a smartphone? And as we speak, there will be clever people within that sector who have got the new idea, whatever that new idea is. But when it comes out, we'll all think, gosh, yes, that's a really good idea. That's what we wanted. Now, process needs. Well, sources of innovation can rise from process needs. To be able to identify a unique solution to a process problem, economic and performance benefits. So sometimes we have a need, a process need, and the process could be to make the product, make it efficiently. It's not just a question of spotting what the customers want, but it has to be produced in an efficient manner so that it goes on the market at a price that the customers can afford. So the product is placed on the market, customers can then purchase it. But in order to do that, the process of production has to be innovated as well. In other words, costs must be kept under control, and the company should strive for efficiency. Henry Ford, or his assembly line, is a prime example of introducing and adopting processes to meet current demands. When Ford decided to produce cars, he broke down the production process, the division of labour, as economists call it, down into small functions. You could argue, of course, that that was dehumanizing because each function was repetitive. It was performed over and over and over by the same people. And it was dehumanizing in the sense that there was no enjoyment in the work. But it was very efficient. And it meant that the cars were produced at a very cheap price, which popularized motoring. So the process was innovated. The production process was innovated. During the 1920s, female workers were in demand to work as switchboard operators for the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T. Again, the process was innovated over time, and gradually new ways of connecting automatic exchanges, for example, connecting telephone calls were developed. But originally, it required human intervention to make sure that the two ends of a telephone call could be joined up, physically joined up with wires. So someone had to take a plug and put it into the right socket to make the connection. To reduce high employee labour costs, later the workers were replaced with automatic exchange board systems, as I said earlier. So the drive for process innovation was ongoing within that sector, and the drive was to automate the exchanges, which of course would mean that less workers would be required, vastly less workers would be required, but the service would improve as a consequence and become more efficient. Now, industry and market changes. Well, changes in the industry and customer preferences are a source of innovation. Industries are constantly in the process of innovation because new techniques, new developments coming out of laboratories, out of universities, new ideas that are constantly impacting on industry. And also, customer preferences are changing all the time. Customers do not want the same products from one year to the next. They want newness, they want innovation, they want change. So these are all pushing towards the introduction of innovation. Companies must be able to identify current market changes and develop innovations which foster growth. In other words, the companies, if they're going to survive and grow, they must engage with this. They can't fight it. They can't ignore it and continue to produce the same items year in, year out. The customers will simply not purchase them. Or alternatively, and probably more likely the case, new competitors will enter the market with exactly what the customers want and take the customers. So companies find that it's an imperative for companies to innovate. They must keep up with what customers want. They must be aware of what customers want, and they must have mechanisms to pick up that information and feed it back so that products can be amended and changed and new products developed. And also that the efficiency of the business itself is under constant scrutiny so as to make it more efficient by introducing the latest production techniques to keep down costs and more efficiently meet customer requirements. Sorry, I've skipped forward a bit. Skipped back, I should say. Industries are changing. Examples include artificial intelligence, social media, tablets, driverless cars, solar electricity. And by the time you study this module, there will probably be a whole range of new innovations. And if you come back to this module, well, it won't be in this format, but if you were to find this format in a few years' time, it will be totally outdated, because there will be so many new products and so many new ideas that have come forward, just perhaps in the course of a couple of years. So artificial intelligence at the moment is holding everyone's attention. What will it be that artificial intelligence will do for us, and how do we control it? But we've already seen the impact, for example, of the next one, social media, not just Twitter and Facebook, but the wide-scale introduction of social media and instant communications through various applications that are available online. We know what tablets can do. Tablets are computers. We know what mobile phones can do, smartphones. They are computers. In fact, Galton College is building its whole teaching model on smartphones. A smartphone is a computer. It's a very powerful computer with a lot of facilities that are not properly used for education purposes. And in that, Galton College tends to be a market leader. We also have driverless cars and solar electricity. But as I said, if you look at this video in a few years' time, it'll be probably totally out of date. There'll be new products, new language, new ways of looking at the world that will have superseded everything I'm saying. Changes in the industry and consumer preferences are a source of innovation. Companies must be able to identify current market changes and develop innovations which foster growth. It must be the case that they're able to pick up on what customers want and develop the products accordingly. So we've got the points I've made about the artificial intelligence. Now, demographic changes. Well, the emphasis on innovation amongst the larger and faster growing age groups. These groups will have their own customer demands and preferences. We know that some countries have an aging population. Some countries have a very young population. The average age in some countries is quite young. The average age in some countries quite old. They will have different requirements. So companies are able to segment the market. They're able to look at some countries or some areas and say, well, these are the products we need to market in those areas, and these are the products we need to market in different areas. There are demographic changes, and these lead to sources of information, of innovation, I should say. Sources of innovation need to be tweaked according to the demographic characteristics available in that area, or that are prevalent in that area. Changes in population preferences, and in particular the age distribution. Well, the aging population in Western countries put demands on new innovations. In the West, where customers and the broad spectrum of consumerism is such that they are quite demanding. In the West, people want solutions, and they want them fast, and they want them efficient, and they want them reliable. So there is pressure on companies to put out the right products with the right quality at the right price. In some countries who perhaps are new to the game, new to innovation and new to this type of technology, they may be more tolerant of slippage of issues. But the quality imperative has now come across from industry to this type of area. And demographic changes are constantly putting pressure on industry to keep up with the requirements of the changes in the population patterns. Older people, as I said, have different requirements to younger people. And they are distinct markets but they are enormous markets, and companies try to innovate within those different sectors. So sources of innovation can be the result of the aging population. For example, innovations that aid mobility or leisure activities for the elderly. We're all aware of holidays that are available for elderly people these holidays packages are designed specifically for older elements of the population. But you also have mobility, changes in the design of motor vehicles, mobility in the home, stair lifts, and facilities for older people at home. These are all sources of innovation. Companies are constantly looking to see if they can do better in all of those areas. And this is what's pushing innovation in general. Changes in perception. Well, capitalizing on people or society's perceptions, sources of innovation in this area can be risky if they are inaccurate perceptions. And sometimes the leaders of industry may perceive what they think are the requirements of the market. They have imagined sometimes they're right, and they will make a lot because perhaps they are the only ones holding those views. And if they read the situation correctly, they will be rewarded profitably. But it's also quite dangerous. Sometimes innovators may think this is what the market wants, and they put the product on the market to find that it's not what the customers want. Perhaps the market research was faulty, there was bias in the research techniques, the information was inaccurate or not processed precisely or whatever. And the perception and the reality were different. And in that case, that innovation would fail and the company would be damaged as a consequence. So trying to imagine what customers want is very complicated. Now, examples of this type of innovation, well, general public identifies smoking as a bad habit. Innovations can introduce new methods of helping people to quit smoking. We have patches that can go onto the arm that kill the craving for nicotine. We have also facilities for smokers to go to, say, for example, not in restaurants, but associated with the restaurant if they so desire. So non-smokers do not have to passively smoke. So there are changes brought about by that. So the Americans view that they are unhealthy. Not just the Americans, it's now spread right across large parts of the world. But also, some people not just see smoking, but they might see diet itself or exercise or the need for healthy living as desirable. And this leads to development of that industry. Not just smoking, but it could be good food or healthy food, lack of chemicals in food, preparation, exercise. So there's a whole industry that has developed about health that perhaps was not around, say, 50 years ago. Capitalizing on people or society's perceptions. Well, sources of innovation in this area can be risky if they are inaccurate perceptions, as I said. And I've looked at over the health and I've looked at the smoking one. So those are two good examples. Now, new knowledge. Well, this type of innovation is based on learning new knowledge. This can be either groundbreaking research, scientific, or technical and social. And a lot of innovation comes from this type of research. Sometimes people do not understand what universities do. They teach undergraduates, they teach perhaps at master's level, and then students can go on to conduct research. And sometimes the research seems very vague, but it's shedding light on a new area. And particularly in the natural sciences, that might be looking at scientific discoveries and changing the way particular items are used or testing particular processes. It's shedding light on a new area. It might be very obscure, but we don't know how we're going to use it in the future. Some may lead directly to innovations in that time period, but some may sit on the shelf for some time and eventually be used in conjunction with perhaps something else. So it's generating new knowledge, and that seems to be part of the human condition. We want newness. This type of innovation is directly linked to entrepreneurship. And an entrepreneur's definition of innovation, Drucker described this as a superstar entrepreneur. The entrepreneur comes up with something completely new. Nowadays we describe an entrepreneur who's perhaps someone who opens a coffee shop. Well, there are lots of coffee shops. But to be a superstar entrepreneur, you come up with something which is different. A completely new product, and one that customers want. It's just nobody has thought about it before. It's new. And that's the superstar. I'm not denigrating people who open coffee shops. Could be someone who comes up with an idea for a new restaurant or a new holiday destination or whatever. But by and large, they've been done. The newness, the superstar category of entrepreneur is one that comes up with something which is radically different. A product or a service that everyone wants, but nobody had thought about before. And someone who's solved perhaps technical problems to bring that product to market. That's the superstar entrepreneur. Advancements in new technology is what paves the way for new products and services. Examples are solar power, driverless cars, robots, artificial intelligence. These are the frontiers, or they seem to be the frontiers in the current time period. Now perhaps in a year's time or 4 or 5 years' time, something else will be along. But to have the accolade of superstar entrepreneur, it must be radical and different and addressing a need that perhaps hitherto had not been even identified. That's the source of a lot of what we were dealing with here. And that's all I'm going to deal with in this video. It's quite a long video, so I hope you've got to the end. It's wise, having said that, should you have to review the video, to stop it and start it and use the forward and backwards slider on the video. That's the advantage of using videos for study purposes. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.